Chosen from the cradle. Signs that show your purpose since childhood. Since the beginning of time, an invisible war has raged. A battle between light and darkness, between truth and deception. And in the midst of this eternal conflict, there are those who have been marked, chosen, and set apart for a purpose far greater than they could ever imagine. But here's the terrifying truth. Most of them never realize it. They walk through life feeling lost. They chase success, yet never feel satisfied. They struggle, question, and wonder why their path is so much harder than everyone else's. The world tells them that money, status, and material wealth define success. But deep inside, they know there must be more. They sense it, but they don't understand it. What if you are one of them? What if, since childhood, the signs have been right in front of you, but you ignored them? What if your pain, your struggles, your moments of isolation were never random? What if they were part of a divine plan that has been unfolding since the moment you took your first breath? Today, you are about to uncover something life-changing. By the end of this video, you will see your past differently. You will understand why your journey has been so difficult. You will learn why you've always felt different from those around you. And most importantly, you will discover the undeniable signs that prove you were chosen, marked by God before you were even born. Because this world is a lie. It convinces people that success is measured by the size of their bank accounts, the luxury they own, or the power they hold. But even the richest, most powerful people still feel empty. They still wake up in the middle of the night, restless, unfulfilled, searching. That's because money cannot replace purpose. Wealth cannot buy meaning. And if you have been called by God, nothing in this world will ever satisfy you until you step into the divine path you were created for. So I need you to do something right now. Stay with me. Do not let distractions pull you away, because what you're about to hear could change your life forever. If you have ever felt like you don't belong, if your heart has ever cried out, asking God, "Why am I different?" then this message is for you. Let's begin. 1. You were chosen before you were born. The signs have always been there. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong? Like no matter how hard you try to fit in, something inside you kept pulling you in a different direction? Maybe you were the quiet child, the one who saw things differently, who felt things more deeply. Maybe you sensed things others couldn't. You noticed injustice, suffering, truth, while the rest of the world seemed blind. You asked questions that no one could answer. You carried burdens that no child should have to bear. But here's the real question. Was that a coincidence? Or was it a sign? A sign that you were never meant to walk the same path as everyone else. A sign that you were set apart before you even took your first breath. The Bible tells us in Jeremiah 1 verse 5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Let that sink in. Before you ever open your eyes, God had already chosen you. Before you ever spoke your first word, He had already written your story. And yet, the world has spent your entire life trying to erase that truth. From the moment you entered this world, there was a battle over your destiny. The enemy saw what you could become. He saw the calling placed on your life long before you did. And he tried to stop you. That's why you faced rejection. That's why you struggled when others had it easy. That's why, no matter how much you try to follow the world's definition of success, it never felt right. Because you were never meant to chase what the world chases. You were meant for something greater. Look at the Bible. Look at the ones who changed history. Moses, Joseph, David, even Jesus himself. They were all set apart from birth. And they all faced opposition before they even had a chance to fulfill their purpose. Moses should have died as a baby. Pharaoh issued a decree to kill all Hebrew male infants. Why? Because the enemy recognized his destiny. The enemy knew that a deliverer was coming, so he tried to wipe him out before he ever had a chance to rise. Joseph had dreams of greatness, dreams that revealed his divine calling. But what happened? His own brothers betrayed him. They threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and left him for dead. Why? Because even before he reached his purpose, he was a threat. And then there's Jesus. Before he could even speak a word, King Herod sent soldiers to slaughter every baby boy in Bethlehem. The enemy knew He knew the power of a chosen one. He knew what would happen if the light was allowed to shine. Do you see the pattern? The enemy does not wait until you are strong. He does not wait until you have stepped fully into your purpose. He attacks early. He attacks when you are weak, when you are vulnerable, when you don't yet understand who you are. That's why your childhood wasn't easy. That's why you faced battles that others never had to fight. The rejection, the loneliness, the struggles that made no sense. It was never about you. It was about the calling on your life. Think about it. Have you ever wondered why you could never fully embrace the things the world values? You watched others chase money, but you always felt like something was missing. You saw people pursue status, but it never seemed important to you. The world glorified wealth, luxury, power, but deep inside, you knew none of it could bring true fulfillment. Why? Because you were never meant to follow the world system. You were meant to follow God's system. And His system does not measure success in dollars, mansions, or luxury cars. His system is measured in purpose, obedience, impact. That is why no amount of money will ever satisfy you. That is why the world's definition of success will always feel empty. Because when you are chosen, the only thing that will ever truly fulfill you is walking in God's plan for your life. And here's the painful truth. Most people never realize this. Most people spend their entire lives chasing the wrong things. They ignore the signs. They try to fit in. They silence the voice inside them that is crying out, "You were made for more." But not you. You are here because you have sensed it. You have felt it. You know that your life has never been ordinary. And now, you are beginning to understand why. Now that you know the truth, what will you do with it? You can walk away. You can ignore this. You can go back to chasing what the world tells you to chase. Or you can step into the reason you were created. You can accept that the struggles were not punishments. They were preparation. You can recognize that the battles were not accidents. They were proof of your calling. And here's the most powerful truth of all. God has been waiting for you to see this. Your childhood, your struggles, your deepest wounds, they were all part of a plan to bring you to this moment. So now, the question is simple. Will you answer the call? The signs were always there. Why you felt different since childhood. Have you ever felt like you didn't fit in? Like no matter how hard you tried, something inside you was different? Maybe as a child, you saw the world in a way others couldn't. Maybe you felt things too deeply, asked too many questions, or sensed truths that no one else seemed to notice. You weren't like the other kids. While they chased after toys, games, and fun, you were drawn to something deeper. You saw the pain in people's eyes. You felt the weight of things no child should carry. While others were carefree, something inside you knew there was more. More to life. More to your existence. More to who you were meant to be. But instead of being celebrated, that difference made you feel alone. It made you feel like an outsider. Like you were speaking a language no one else understood. And so, you tried to ignore it. You tried to blend in. You told yourself it was just your imagination, just childhood curiosity. But no matter how hard you pushed it down, it never truly left you. Because it wasn't just a feeling. It was a sign. The world teaches us to dismiss childhood instincts. It tells us that children are just dreamers, that their thoughts and feelings are just fantasies. But that's a lie. Because throughout the Bible, God revealed His plans to people when they were still children. Look at Joseph. As a boy, he had visions of greatness. He saw dreams of himself rising above his brothers, of leading people, of stepping into a divine purpose. But instead of being encouraged, he was mocked, hated, and rejected. His own brothers resented him, sold him into slavery, and left him for dead. Why? Because even before he walked in his purpose was clear. Look at Samuel. He was just a child, lying in the temple, when he heard God's voice calling his name. But he didn't recognize it. He thought it was Eli, the priest, calling him. 3 times God spoke. 3 times Samuel mistook it for something else. And that's what happens to most people. God speaks early, but most never recognize His voice. How many times did God try to reach you as a child? How many moments, dreams, or feelings did you dismiss as nothing? Did you ever wake up in the middle of the night, feeling something powerful, but not knowing why? Did you ever sense things about people before they spoke, feel a pull towards something greater, or have an unexplainable knowing deep in your spirit? Those weren't coincidences. They were God's fingerprints on your soul. The problem is the world doesn't want you to recognize your calling. It tells children to grow up, to be realistic, to stop dreaming. It pushes people to chase money, success, and security rather than purpose. It convinces them that if something doesn't bring financial gain, it has no value. So, many people bury their calling before they even understand it. They trade their purpose for a paycheck. They exchange their divine gifts for a life that feels safe but feels empty. But let me ask you, has ignoring it ever truly worked? Have you ever been able to fully silence the pull in your soul? Have you ever been able to completely forget the whispers that tell you there is more? Because no matter how much the world distracts you, the signs never stop. Think back to when you were young, before the world shaped you, before doubt crept in, before people told you who you were supposed to be. What moved you? Were you drawn to spiritual things while others were chasing fun? Did you have a deep compassion for others while the world chased selfish gain? Were you given insights, ideas, or wisdom that others dismissed as just a child's imagination? Because in the Bible, those who were chosen always showed signs early. Look at David. Before he ever fought Goliath, he was a shepherd boy, protecting his flock. While others saw an ordinary child, God saw a king. Look at Solomon. When given the chance to ask for anything, he didn't ask for money, power, or success. He asked for wisdom. And because his heart was in the right place, God gave him both wisdom and wealth beyond measure. The world judges success by riches and luxury, but God judges by the heart. And if you have always felt out of place, if the world version of success has never satisfied you, it's because you were never meant to follow their system. You were meant to follow his system. You have always known you were different. You have always felt something pulling you, guiding you, whispering that your life was meant for more. But now you have a choice. You can continue ignoring it. You can pretend you don't feel the pull. You can drown it out with distractions, with money, with whatever the world says should make you happy. Or you can finally listen. You can finally see that the moments you thought were strange, the feelings you try to push away, the signs that have followed you since childhood, they were never random. They were God calling you. And now you must decide, will you recognize the signs? Or will you keep waiting for more, while the purpose God placed inside you goes unnoticed? Because here's the truth. Your purpose didn't just begin today. It began before you were born. The only question left is, will you answer? Why the enemy attacked you early, the battle over your calling. Have you ever wondered why your life has been so hard? Why you faced battles that others never had to fight? Why, no matter how much you tried, peace always felt just out of reach? It wasn't because you were unlucky. It wasn't because you were forgotten. It was because you were chosen, and the enemy knew it before you did. Before you could even walk, before you could even speak, a war had already begun over your life. A war that was never about your present. It was about your future. Because when God marks someone, when he places a divine purpose on a person's life, the enemy doesn't wait for them to grow into it. He attacks early. Look at the Bible. Look at those who carried a powerful calling. Moses was just a baby when Pharaoh ordered the execution of every Hebrew male child. Why? Because the enemy saw a deliverer before Moses even knew his own name. Joseph was still a boy when his brothers betrayed him, sold him, and left him for dead. Why? Because even before Joseph walked in his purpose, the enemy recognized his potential. Jesus was just an infant when King Herod, in a desperate attempt to stop what had already been written, ordered the massacre of every baby boy in Bethlehem. Do you see the pattern? The greatest attacks don't come when a person is strong. They come when they're still growing. Because the enemy knows if he can break you before you realize who you are, then he can keep you from ever walking into your calling. And that's why your life has been filled with opposition, rejection, and pain. It wasn't because you were weak. It was because you were dangerous. Think back to your childhood. Did you experience hardships that made no sense? Did you feel like you were constantly fighting battles that others didn't have to face? Maybe you grew up in a broken home. Maybe you faced rejection, even from the people who were supposed to love you the most. Maybe you carried pain that no one else saw, burdens that no child should have to bear. And you ask God why. Why did others have peace while you had to fight? Why did happiness come so easily to them? But for you, it was always a battle. Because your struggles weren't random. They were an attack on your purpose. If the enemy could convince you that you were worthless, that you were just another person trying to survive, then you would never step into the powerful destiny that was placed inside you before you were even born. That's why you were attacked so early. That's why you were surrounded by pain, by obstacles, by situations that seemed designed to break you. Because if the enemy could break you, then he could stop you from ever rising. But he failed. The world will tell you that struggle is a sign of failure. That if you faced hardship, if your life has been marked by difficulty, then somehow you must have done something wrong. But the truth is the opposite. The fiercest battles are reserved for the greatest warriors. Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for years before he ever stepped into his calling. David was anointed king as a boy, but before he ever wore a crown, he spent years running for his life, hiding in caves, fighting for survival. Esther was taken from her family, placed in a foreign palace, and forced to risk her life before she ever fulfilled her purpose. The struggle is not proof that you are forgotten. It is proof that you are chosen. The ones who are called to greatness will always face great opposition. If the enemy had his way, you wouldn't be here right now. But you are. You survived the pain. You endured the rejection. You made it through the battles that were meant to destroy you. And that means one thing: you were not meant to be broken. You were meant to rise. Every hardship, every wound, every moment of suffering, it wasn't just an attack. It was training. God doesn't send untrained warriors in a battle. He doesn't raise up weak leaders. He doesn't give small missions to those who carry great callings. Joseph had to go through the pit, the slavery, the prison, because he was being prepared to rule a nation. David had to endure rejection, loneliness, and war, because he was being prepared to lead God's people. Moses had to leave behind comfort, wealth, and power, because he was being prepared to deliver an entire generation. And you had to walk through pain, through rejection, through hardships that no one else understood, because you were being prepared for something far greater than you can imagine. Now that you know the truth, what will you do with it? You can look at your past and see only pain, or you can recognize the preparation. You can continue believing that your struggles meant nothing, or you can accept that they were shaping you for something greater. Because here's what the enemy never expected: you made it through. He tried to stop you before you even began. He threw battles at you when you were too young to fight back. He tried to convince you that you were alone, forgotten, unworthy. But you survived, and now he is terrified, because now you know the truth. Now you see that the pain wasn't just suffering, it was a setup. Now you understand that the struggles weren't meant to break you, they were meant to build you. And now there's only one thing left to do: rise. Rise into the calling you were always meant for. Step into the purpose that was written for you before you were born. Stop believing the lie that you are ordinary, that your life was random, that your pain was meaningless. Because everything, every battle, every tear, every sleepless night was leading to this moment. And now, the only question left is, will you step forward? Your struggles were never a setback, they were preparation. Have you ever felt like your life has been nothing but trials? Like every time you took one step forward, something pulled you 2 steps back? Like no matter how hard you fought, something always stood in your way? You tried to build a life of peace, but chaos found you. You wanted stability, but uncertainty followed you. You prayed for breakthrough, but instead, you faced more battles. And so, you started asking the hard questions. God, why does my life feel like a constant struggle? Why do I face more resistance than others? Why does it seem like every door slams shut before I can walk through it? And here's the truth you need to hear today. Your struggles were never punishment. They were preparation. Because when God calls someone to greatness, He first prepares them through fire. Look at the ones God raised up in the Bible. None of them stepped into their purpose without first walking through trials. Joseph had a dream of leadership, but before he ruled, he was betrayed, enslaved, and imprisoned. Moses was called to lead, but before he freed Israel, he spent 40 years in the wilderness. David was anointed king, but before he wore the crown, he spent years hiding in caves, fighting for survival. None of them skipped the process. None of them took a shortcut, because God does not rush preparation. If you have been through trials that felt unbearable, it's because God was refining you, strengthening you, shaping you into the person you need to be for what is coming next. The world thinks blessing comes instantly, but in the kingdom of God, elevation comes after endurance. Think about the things you've faced, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the struggles that left you wondering if you would ever make it through. What if they weren't meant to break you? What if they were meant to build you? Every rejection, it was making you stronger. Every delay, it was teaching you patience. Every closed door, it was protecting you from something that wasn't meant for you. Because God doesn't just call the chosen, He prepares them. And the greater the calling, the greater the preparation. Have you ever looked around and wondered why some people seem to have smooth lives? Why do they seem to get everything handed to them? Why do they succeed while you struggle? Why do they walk an easy path while yours feels like a battlefield? Here's why. Because you are called to something different. The ones who have no divine mission face no real opposition. They build their lives on wealth, status, and comfort, things that could be taken away in an instant. But you are called to something eternal, something the enemy fears, something that requires refinement, strength, and endurance. And that kind of calling cannot be built on weak foundations. So God let you go through the fire. He let you face what others didn't have to. He allowed trials that tested you beyond your limits. Not because He was punishing you, but because He was preparing you. Think back to the moments that almost broke you. The nights you cried out to God, asking why. The days you felt abandoned, wondering if He was even listening. And now look where you are. You survived. You walked through the storms. You endured what others couldn't. You faced battles that should have destroyed you, but you're still standing. Why? Because God never intended for those trials to defeat you. He intended for them to shape you. Joseph's prison wasn't his end. It was his training ground. David's battles weren't his destruction. They were his preparation. Moses' time in the wilderness wasn't punishment. It was his transformation. And your struggles? They weren't meant to crush you. They were meant to equip you. Now that you see the truth, you have a choice. You can look at your struggles and see only pain. Or you can recognize God's hand in every trial. You can keep asking why life has been so unfair. Or you can accept that every hardship was training for what is coming next. Because here's the reality. God is not done with you yet. Every battle you faced was leading you here. Every struggle was preparing you for a purpose far greater than you can imagine. But now it's up to you. Will you step forward in faith? Will you trust that the pain had a purpose? Will you finally embrace the calling that you were always meant for? Because one thing is certain, God never wastes pain. And if you let Him, He will turn every tear, every wound, every broken piece of your past into the foundation of your greatest victory. So now, the question is simple. Will you trust Him? The gifts you've had since childhood, clues to your calling. Have you ever felt like you were meant for more? Like there was something inside you, something different, something powerful that the world never fully recognized? Maybe you had a talent that others dismissed. Maybe you had wisdom beyond your years. Maybe you saw things, felt things, understood things that others never did. And for years, you wondered why. Why did you think differently? Why did you feel so deeply? Why did you see what others were blind to? Because those weren't random traits. They were clues. Clues to who you were always meant to be. The world teaches people to chase money, power, status. It tells them to build a life that looks successful on the outside, even if it feels empty on the inside. But God's plan is different. When He created you, He placed something unique inside of you. A gift, a calling, a divine ability, meant to be used not for your glory, but for His purpose. Look at the great leaders of the Bible. They didn't just wake up one day and discover their calling. It was always inside them from childhood. Samuel had the ability to hear God's voice as a child, long before anyone recognized his calling. Joseph had dreams of leadership before he ever ruled a nation. David had the heart of a warrior before he ever fought Goliath. Their gifts were there from the beginning, but at first no one saw them. No one understood them. No one believed in them. Just like you. Think back to your childhood. Were you the one who asked too many questions? The one who saw truth when others followed the crowd? The one who felt deeper, cared more, believed that life had greater meaning? Maybe you had talents that no one nurtured. Maybe you had dreams that others called impossible. Maybe you were surrounded by people who never saw your full potential. And after a while, you started doubting yourself. You started believing that your gifts didn't matter, that they were foolish, that you should focus on what the world values: wealth, security, success. So you buried them. You silenced the voice inside you that told you you were different for a reason. You ignored the pull in your heart that whispered you were meant for more. But here's what you need to understand. What the world ignored was never a mistake. It was God's signature on your soul. The world is designed to make you forget who you are. It keeps people distracted, chasing things that will never satisfy them. It convinces them that success is measured in dollars and luxury, not in purpose and obedience. And so, many people waste their gifts. They take what God placed inside them, and they use it for the wrong reasons. They trade their calling for comfort, their divine assignment for a paycheck. And then they wonder why, no matter how much they have, they still feel empty. Because a person who ignores their calling will never feel fulfilled. Look at Solomon. He asked for wisdom, not wealth. And because his heart was aligned with God, he received both. Look at Moses. He walked away from luxury and power, and instead became the leader of a nation. What about you? Have you been using your gifts the way God intended? Or have you been ignoring them, chasing what the world told you would make you happy? Because if you've spent your life trying to fit in, trying to build a life that looks like everyone else's, then maybe it's time to ask yourself a different question. Think about your talents, your strengths, the things that have always come naturally to you. Have you used them for God's purpose? Or have you buried them, believing they weren't important? The enemy wants nothing more than for you to forget what God placed inside of you. He wants you to believe that money is more important than meaning. That success is measured in luxury, not in impact. That your talents are just skills, not divine tools meant to shape the world. But deep down, you know the truth. You've always known. That's why, no matter how much you try to ignore it, something keeps calling you back. Something inside you knows you were created for more. Now that you know, what will you do? You can keep ignoring it. You can keep chasing what the world tells you to chase. You can keep pretending that your gifts don't matter. Or you can finally step into the reason you were created. Because God didn't give you those gifts for nothing. He didn't place them inside you so you could spend your life living like everyone else. He gave them to you because you were meant to change lives, shape futures, and bring His kingdom to earth. And now, you have a decision to make. Will you rise into your calling? Or will you let the world convince you that your gifts were just a coincidence? Because here's what you need to know. God doesn't make mistakes. And neither did He when He created you. Now you stand at a crossroads. You cannot unsee what has been revealed. You cannot pretend you don't know the truth. Your struggles were never random. Your pain was never meaningless. Your gifts were never just coincidences. They were signs, clear, undeniable, placed in your life since childhood, whispering that you were chosen for something far greater than this world can offer. But here's the real question. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you keep living as if your life is ordinary? Will you keep chasing what never truly satisfies? Will you let the world distract you with money, with comfort, with things that will fade like dust in the wind? Or will you rise? Will you finally step into the purpose you were born for? Will you walk boldly into the destiny that God wrote for you before you even took your first breath? Because one thing is certain, there is no middle ground. The world will always try to pull you away. It will promise you happiness and riches, fulfillment and luxury, meaning and status. But it's all a lie. Nothing in this world will ever fill the void that only God's calling can. So today, I ask you, will you choose? Because the time is coming when those who are chosen will no longer be able to stay in the background. They will rise. They will lead. They will walk in the purpose they were always meant for. And now, the choice is in front of you. If this message has stirred something inside you, if you feel the weight of truth pressing on your heart, do not ignore it. Right now, take a moment. Stop everything. Speak to God. Surrender your doubts, your fears, your hesitations. And if you are ready to step into what He has called you to do, declare it now. Drop your prayer in the comments. Let the world see your faith. Write it boldly. Lord, I surrender to your plan. I accept your calling. I choose you. Because when you take that step, when you declare your faith, heaven rejoices. The angels take note, and your name is written where it truly matters. Your journey is not over. It is only just beginning.